Hello and welcome to another An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about the Satanic Rites of Dracula from 1973. And the film takes place in the then contemporary UK, so early 70s United Kingdom, and we begin by learning that four very powerful men have taken to visiting a remote home on a suspiciously regular basis, and a small cadre of the Secret Service are trying to find out why. They have to be very circumspect in their investigation, however, because one of the men in question is a senior official in intelligence operations and could easily have them all fired. So, never fun when you're spying on your own boss, right? Now, it ultimately emerges that the four men have fallen under the sway of a cult, and after a gratuitously large amount of the film has been dedicated to ogling the naked woman at the cult's Black Mass, the investigators turn to Professor Van Helsing for assistance. This being sort of in his area of expertise, cults and the like. Together with his granddaughter, Van Helsing investigates and soon determines that none other than Count Dracula is behind the cult. Hardly a surprise for the audience, given the film's title. Dracula is using the four men, who he has dominated with his hypnotic vampiric powers, to develop and distribute an incredibly virulent plague with which he intends to wipe out mankind. Now, this would, of course, also wipe out Dracula's own food source, but that appears to be his actual motivation. The vampire is finally ready to meet the end of his own existence, but he's too evil to not take the rest of us with him. The stage is thus set for one last showdown between Van Helsing and the vampire count. So this is the seventh of 8 Dracula movies made by Hammer Films, and just marginally the worst reviewed. One of the others comes very close to being as badly reviewed as this one, but yes, this is the worst reviewed. So let's talk about what the film does wrong, apart from pretty much almost everything, that is. Okay, so first of all, I think that Count Dracula Wants to Finally Actually Die is a pretty interesting concept to put at the core of a vampire film. You could really shake up the film dynamic with a starting point like that. Perhaps the first act has Dracula desperately stalking his nemesis Van Helsing for once, rather than the other way around, because the vampire, needs to find the only man he believes can give him his final release. Van Helsing, of course, has plenty of reasons to make it hard for a vampire to find him or reach him if they do find him. It'd be a nice flip of the usual format to have the vampire being the one who's desperately looking for Van Helsing. That doesn't preclude ultimately making Dracula the villain, of course. Perhaps it turns out the only way he can permanently, irrevocably die is if there are no humans left alive. Sort of where there's blood, there's life kind of thing. And being Count Dracula, he's more than willing to take us all with him if it means that he gets what he wants. So you still take the same premise, you go to the same final destination, which is that Dracula is the bad guy and has to be stopped because he's going to kill us all. But you do it in a more interesting way than just basically, it's exactly the same plot line, just with a slightly different widget or MacGuffin to it. But no, this movie just recycles the same old Dracula formula that Hammer had been serving up for 15 years and 7 movies by this point, except that this time they also served up some gratuitous nudity, basically. The second thing it wastes is the new blood in the cast. You may have caught my fleeting mention of Van Helsing's granddaughter in my synopsis of the film. The mention was fleeting because the script does very little with her, utilising her mostly to look pretty and scream in terror. Because, of course, that's all she does. Hammer horror films pretty much only have 3 female characters in them: aged crones, wholesome young women who scream, and evil seductresses. That's a particularly egregious problem here, however, for 2 reasons. First, because bringing in Van Helsing's grandchild was a great opportunity to transition the role of hero in the franchise to a new actor. Taking nothing away from Peter Cushing's skills as a thespian, but he was pushing 60 by this point. He did actually turn 60 in 1973. And after starring in 7 movies in the franchise, it was probably past time to hand over the reins of the role to a new face. Second, because in the role of his granddaughter, they cast Joanna Lumley. A couple of years after this, Miss Lumley would show her ability to carry a central role in The New Avengers, and then an equally beloved UK television series, Sapphire and Steel, a couple of years after that. If Hammer had recognised what they had in her, they would and should have given her a lot more to do and potentially been able to capitalise on her later success for their own benefit. They didn't. They just gave her exactly the same stand there, look pretty, and scream role that they gave to many young women in the course of the 60s and 70s, and they missed an opportunity because of it. Finally, the third and final problem with the film is everything to do with the finale. There's a lot of contrivance required to set it all up, for the first thing. Contrivance that neither of the Van Helsings even has a role in, before Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing have their final confrontation in what are probably still their most famous respective roles. And we're talking about men who also played Saruman and Doctor Who. Unfortunately, said final confrontation is a disastrously bad one. I mean, I understand the basic idea, which ties into Balkan folklore, that Hawthorne is an anathema to vampires, and that the stake used to kill one must be made from this wood. But the way this is played out on screen is basically that Dracula gets tangled up in a bramble bush, and then, despite all his vampiric powers, is helpless to prevent Cushing from staking him. You could possibly have made that work. But the film would have needed to make some real effort to establish underlying folklore ahead of time. It doesn't, and all it does is end up making the company's signature villain and the core of their signature franchise look like a chump, which is not a good idea, frankly. I remember getting to the end of this movie and just being like, "Wait, that's the ending? That's what you had?" No wonder Christopher Lee never came back. Yeah, it's not good. Okay, so that was the Satanic Rites of Dracula. Next time, we'll be talking about High School of the Dead, a Japanese anime series that is more or less equal part zombies and fan service. Not my usual kind of thing. The zombies are, the fan service not so much. But we'll talk about that a lot more next time. In the meantime, thanks for watching this one, and I hope you enjoyed it.